And we've already had a chance at the panel before lunch to listen to Riten Gohil, and we will have a chance to hear more about what he is doing. While I was introducing him before, I didn't say that he's a Liverpool fan, a cricket fan as well. But here he'll talk again about the technologies. We already heard that he is from a RegTech company, Sponic. So, Riten, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Is it this mic here and this clicker? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to the embassy here for inviting us and organising this wonderful event and doing it before Brexit happens. This way, at least it means I can get in and out of the country much easier than it will be after October the 31st. I'm hoping I can get home tonight. That's probably the more challenging thing. So, some of you may have heard me speak a bit earlier on the panel about various themes around this topic. I thought it would be good to go into this in a little bit more detail within the allotted time I have, and I'll do my best to stick with it. So let's look at the landscape. We talked about the trends in digital interaction and the way consumers are transacting online. I blame Netflix, I blame Amazon, I blame Google and Apple, all those wonderful technologies which essentially mean that as consumers we expect similar experiences when we interact with our banks, and some are able to get there, some sadly are not. So millenniums, have got used to this world of being driven by this new digital economy and this whole swipe left, swiping right type of behavior. Is Tinder a thing out here? No? Okay, Tinder's a hookup site in the UK and America. So you can basically hook up with a male or female anywhere in the part of the world by swiping left or right on a profile. I think the key thing that we have as a challenge is, whilst large banks are unable to innovate quick enough and deploy the right technologies to stay ahead of the curve, we're seeing many challenges in fintechs move above the curve fairly quickly. And that's obviously a problem for some of the large banks. It's a big issue with retaining market share. But we're seeing a lot more by way of the partnerships that are being created between large banks and fintechs as a whole. One of the things which I think what we're seeing is that the risks in this environment continue to grow, and we are seeing great innovation, but the cybersecurity threat space is a problem, and it will continue to be a problem, as I'll explain further. There are sort of four key themes around the challenges we face from a security perspective. The sort of the data breach and cybercrime threat space is big. It's quite significant. It affects organizations all over the world. You have what I talked about before, social engineering, so the way consumers are manipulated to transfer their details, their information to criminals to essentially then commit crime against their accounts. And money muling, I'm not sure how big that is over here, but money muling, something we see in the UK and quite big in Europe, where the proceeds of cybercrime are often put into the account of a genuine consumer, mainly students in the UK, who enable their banks to be used to then transfer money to criminals in other parts of the world. And to the individual, the student who does this, they're getting a small sort of cut from that transaction, and for them it's a way of earning a bit of money, right? They just say, oh, I'm just using my bank account, but they're actually participating in a money laundering offence and potentially could end up with 14 years in jail. So these are the sorts of problems we have. We have very vulnerable consumers who are easily susceptible to these challenges. We have this bigger problem with the manifestation from data breaches, which is sort of identity theft and fraud, which is committed by the credentials, the identity information that is extracted from these breaches, then being used to commit a crime downstream. So if you think about the very large breach at Equifax a year ago, 148 million records in the US were available to criminals in cyberspace. any one of those data records could be used to commit a crime, right? They could be used to open up a bank account in somebody else's name. They could be used to open up a mobile wallet, payment instrument, credit card, whatever it is, because those people all exist. They're genuine people. And that's sort of the difficulty we have, that this type of challenge with data and how it's used is challenging the market as we see it. And then the other sort of challenges are sort of the increasing levels of regulation, right? Which the larger banks in particular have to devote a lot of time, effort, resource, and money to manage sort of the various regulations. The PSD2 is the one that's keeping a lot of banks very busy at the moment. You've got the 5th AMLD coming in next year, which again requires focus. We spent a lot of last year thinking about, and before that, GDPR as well. So whilst all these regulations exist, these become constraints and challenges and complexities for banks and fintechs alike to manage, to sort of stay ahead of the curve and manage, their overall risk management sort of framework. So when we think about what does all this mean, what are the tangible sort of outputs from these various risks that we see? So here are some of the big headline figures that are worth sort of discussing. The first one is a set of records that are kept by Gemalto, who are one of the big sort of cybersecurity businesses globally. They keep this sort of threat index of data breaches, and they've identified since the year 2013, 14.7 billion data records have been extracted by criminals. And if you go back to my point earlier about how data can be used to commit a crime downstream, these are pretty big numbers. There aren't even 14.7 billion people in this world, but there's a lot of data out there that could be used against most people that exist. The value of card fraud is growing. Nielsen predict by next year we'll have hit $35 billion globally from card fraud losses as a result of some of the cyber type attacks we're seeing already. And as a result of all of this, the amount of money that's spent to manage risk and stay compliant with the regulatory framework out there is growing all the time as well. And by 2023, Juniper suggests that we are going to be spending globally $115 billion just to be able to keep up with the rate of pace of compliance. And that's probably a very low estimation. So you've got, on one hand, financial losses, you've got exposure, you've got risk, but you've got an increasing level of spend to try and mitigate against all these different challenges that are out there. If I dig deep into that threat index a little bit further, this is just the Gemalto analysis of how the various attacks on data breaches have affected and been extracted from different industries. And number one in this section is social media. So we talked earlier about the value of social media in this new digital world. Could it be used to profile customers better? Could it be used as a behavioral credit score? This stat says probably not, because if 54% of the 14.7 billion worth of data breaches have involved social media, 56% of that of 14 billion, then that's quite significant, which means how can you really rely on social media data, with much confidence? Other industries, obviously, are equally sort of affected. Hospitality is becoming quite a new one. Financial services, funny enough, is not as high. Actually, it's off this list. It's probably I cut it off from my slide. Financial services is actually quite low, but they're often the victims as a result of this problem, right? So the data is harvested and extracted from all these different sources, but used largely to commit crime with financial services. Why? Because that's where the money lies, and it's where the criminals see the greatest value in downstream sort of maximization. So I talked about risk, and that's always an easy sort of a theme for a conference. You can quote statistics and you can quote numbers that will generally resonate with people or scare people in many ways. But as Sonic as a business, we think about embracing the digital world at the same time, right? So in one light, yes, you've got to think about the risk that exists, but don't forget about the desire and the ability to want to drive digital channels. And so getting that right is really important. That balance between managing risk and driving customer behavior, customer acquisition is equally important. And so when we talk about risk, being too cautious often can be even more challenging. And that's having said, that all these, statistics are quite scary as they are. You still have to run a business, and you should. It's about how you do it and how you do it effectively. And this is where we come in a little bit. So Asphonic, what do we do? So we are a London-based digital risk management business, and we started a business in 2012 through a team of experts who've all worked in the digital risk management industry for many years. So, from the likes of Visa and CyberSource, RBS, many fraud products. And what we created was essentially a solution that was designed to think about how do you embrace cloud in the most effective way? How do you enable the access to the growing innovation in risk management in an accessible way? So one of the biggest challenges we have with particularly larger banks is being able to ingest information and onboard multiple third-party services from multiple vendors. So how do we ease that and streamline that, and then offer a service? So what we created essentially was this platform, which is a global API marketplace, which we make available via a single API. So we have over 85 of the world's leading data providers plugged into our platform, which we expose through a single connection, right? So that essentially means you can manage risk, onboard customers, do customer authentication, AML transaction monitoring, all those different use cases through a single connection point. What we also do with the data is we contextualize it, because connecting to APIs is great. Anyone can really connect to APIs. It's not really the big story here. But it's about how you use that data intelligently to make informative decisions about your customers. So our guys are real experts in being able to decipher and distill and understand data from different APIs, from different disparate data formats, and bring that together within our system to give you real-time decisions on good and bad actors within the system. This is the real, crown jewels to what we offer as a business. It's delivered by a team of experts who work with our clients, banks, fintechs, gaming operators, payment companies around the world to enable them to access the best-in-class tools, educate them on the services that are available, and then bring them together through our service. We also sort of future-proof this as well, so that as the threat space changes, as new services come to the market, we can deploy them into the platform without too much pain point. So that's one of the big focus areas, is providing a really agile, flexible technology that's designed to address the emerging and future challenges you might see as a business, without having to then redevelop your technology to sort of meet these requirements on a regular basis. Essentially, we take all that pain away from you. So this is the core product. It's called Workflow Manager, and what it is a customizable workflow editor, which our team develop and deploy and orchestrate data from multiple providers to make these real-time decisions. And so what we do with orchestration is, this is a typical customer onboarding KYC journey. And we have a start point, we have an end point. We have various phases in this particular journey that is looking to create what we call a digital picture of the consumer. So from the very first point of when that customer interacts, we profile the device they're using, their location, their mobile. So where is their mobile currently located? I'm currently in Slovakia. My device will be broadcast as being in Slovakia. My PC will be in Slovakia. And my mobile phone is roaming in Slovakia. So I'm in the right place. All these signals make sense. If I try and buy a flight with British Airways in London, they should contextualize that and think, yes, all that makes sense. This person is using a laptop he normally uses. He's traveling because his mobile phone's got a roaming flag and it's in Bratislava, and it's probably him. Don't decline him because it looks high risk because he's abroad. Contextualize the data so that you can onboard this customer. And that's the sort of thing we do. We look at data intelligently to identify genuine actors and bad actors very quickly. We then do a lot of work around the KYC profiling of a particular customer. We have multiple bureaus we work with across the world, and what we can do is take data from different vendors and give you a view of a combined picture of KYC based on those outputs. We then take it to the AML level, PEPs and sanctions. We have multiple bureaus around the world. We can identify UBOs, we can identify adverse media, we can identify high-risk AML and PEPs and sanctions entities, all within a few seconds. We can execute this type of workflow in our system to onboard a customer digitally within about 10 to 15 seconds. And we do this regularly around the world for some of the largest brands that exist on the planet. The marketplace I mentioned is underpinned by, as I said, 85 of the world's leading providers. Some of these are household names. They may be services that you use today or interested in using. But we are, agnostic to the different vendors out there. We're constantly adding new services in, and we do a lot of work in the quality and the management of those different third-party relationships. We also have the ability to bring a single commercial relationship as well. As part of the challenge with large banks is the procurement and onboarding of new vendors. We can actually provide a facility where you could use our single contract, our arrangement to consume as much data as you need through this single API. So it's an out-of-the-box solution which also comes with a whole range of GDPR protections, because that's the other big fear you might have as well. All these different data vendors from different parts of the world, what about GDPR? Well, I spent the most of 2017 and 18 developing a very strong and robust GDPR framework, which means every client has a back-to-back set of protections and provisions under GDPR from vendors across the globe that is compliant within EU law. That assumes that we are still part of the EU and the UK, by the way. We also have a case management tool, a front-end UI, which you can start to review and receive data from the workflows in real time. So as soon as customers are starting to hit your system and be onboarded, you can start to visualize and see what's going on within a few seconds. And what we can do is create visualization so that you focus on some of these graphs and pie charts which tell you that we're seeing risks of a certain profile over the last hour, day, month, which needs investigating first. In a queue of traffic and activity, you could have multiple cases. And what the visualization does is say, let's think about these high peaks and troughs first before we do anything else. I'm being pressed for time, so I will move on very quickly. Key to this is just giving you some testimonials, and we're happy to share the slides afterwards. But there's three of our key clients: PaySafe Group, Funding Circle, SafeCharge, have all seen various sort of benefits from working with us. A lot of it is around the access to new innovation. It's about the subject matter expertise we provide to deliver and deploy these tools. And making their problems and their challenges in navigating through this really complex RegTech digital risk management world a lot more easier. That's essentially what we do. Just in the slide pack, when you get it, there are a couple more detailed case studies around some of our clients and some of their experiences of working with us, but you're more than welcome to use that. In summary, this is what we do: provide global KYC, KYB, customer authentication, fraud detection, prevention, AML transaction monitoring, all via a single API, which means you can take lots of pain away from multiple providers. And I'm more than happy if you want to get in touch to learn more details, and I'm around for some of the today. If you want to see a demo of the product, I'm more happy to do that as well.
You spoke about customer dedication, but how did you gain the trust of your clients at the beginning of the journey?
I mean, that's hard work, because when you're a startup, like we were in 2012, going to some of the biggest brands in the world is often quite hard to sort of try and get them to be convinced of your service. I think what was key was because of the partners we were working with, the vendors that we had in our platform, they were very credible names: the Experian, the Equifaxes, ThreatMetrics, all the big brands in the risk management world, and that gave a lot of credibility very early on. And I think what helped was our background as individuals as well. and our networks. We obviously didn't go and try and speak to every single bank in the world. We had some very good contacts that we wanted to leverage first and get some initial early clients, and that's
And
worked
doesn't
quite well.
Brexit threatens the credibility you've gained? Because how much do you expect Brexit to hit the business? How many of your clients come from the EU?
Oh, Brexit affects the credibility of every British person on the planet at the moment in lots of different ways. Look, I mean, I think we're actually in quite a lucky place where we actually host the platform in Belgium in the EU, and that's still a long
You are
term.
prepared.
So we've been very
move.
prepared for a very long time for this, and the way we actually manage data and we encrypt it means we're not actually sharing full personal information across the airwaves. That's all encrypted, and it's actually deleted once it's being passed through the system.
Riten Gohil, thank you.
Thank you.